Alright, welcome back here to our final installment, or what should be our final installment of our little series of videos here showing you how to use PHP and MySQL on IONOS web hosting to create a database, create some tables in that database, import some data, build a web form, and query data out of that database. So what we have here is just a finished example of what we're going to build. After this video, we should have something that looks a lot similar to this. It's just a simple way for a user to enter a query string. You can search by artist or album. It queries the database, brings back the result set. We loop through the results and dump them into this table. Previous videos, we did create those database tables. We created the music catalog. We did a CSV file import, and then we built a simple yet ugly web form that looks like this that we're going to spruce up in this video. That does take the user input, allows us to hit submit, and sends the data to this web page with a get functionality. So what we're going to do in this video is grab this search string, query string here, and then run it against a MySQL database table, get the results, dump them into the table, and then we'll have a live functioning search function on our website. So we're going to bounce back into the code. We created this code here last time on the last video. It's just a simple database connection string, a web form, the table where the results will end up with some headers, and then we have some dummy data here, just placeholder data as we created our table. So this is going to get replaced with the result set that we will be looping through and outputting a row for each result. If we scroll up here, we do see this form method equals get, meaning when they hit submit, it's going to put this variable name into the URL, which we will pull back and then run our PHP against, all server side, and then get our results. So the first thing we're going to do is get into our PHP. So opening, closing PHP brackets. So what we want to do, we want to first determine if someone submitted a form. So how to do that is we want to see if this variable exists. So you can, with PHP, do if is set. And the way we pull this variable is by using a get function like that. So if get query string is set, meaning there is something in that variable, that means form submission has happened. Submission has happened. So when that happens, we want to not just output the rest of the basic HTML page. We need to get that query string, run a query, and then echo out a result set. So I am going to begin by writing the query. So the query equals, it's going to be a select statement. So it is going to say select, and the way that SQL works is select, and then you would go table name dot column name, and then you can do a column, and then do table name dot column name again. And if you did see the database creation, you might have some idea what our tables look like. If not, I'm just going to start typing the queries and then tell you. We have a artist table and an album table. So artist.artist ID, and then we'll get right into the album.album ID. And what I usually do is I know how many columns we're going to pull back, so I usually just write it once, copy it as many times as needed, and then do the same for the second table. So they're not all called artist ID. The second one is called artist name. That would be your Taylor Swift, your The Killers, whatever it might be. Then we have a bio, and then we have an image. That's an image of the band or artist. And then we have an album, and we have an album ID. And then we have a album.artist ID, which links the album back to the artist without using text in our album table to see which artists own which albums. Then we have an album title. Our column is just called title. We have the release year. And then we have the album art, which is just a reference to a file name in the file system. So it's just a JPEG or GIF or whatever it is that I had saved off. So we're selecting essentially all the artist data, the album data. But where are we pulling that from? We're pulling it from artist. And here's where it gets a little tricky. We need to pull it from artist, but we need to relate each artist ID in album to their appropriate artist. So when we dump out a list of albums, all the albums match to the appropriate artist. And the way we do that, a couple ways to do that, we are going to use what's called an inner join. So we are going to say inner join. So we're selecting from artist. We want to inner join on album. So inner join album on. So now we want to say what do we want to use to make this join? We want to use artist.artistID and album.artistID because those are the two attributes that relate those two tables together. So it's simple as on album.artistID is equal to artist.artistID. So for this query, we don't have a where statement. So we could go ahead and upload this, test it. We'd have a little more to do just to pull back a result set, but we also don't want to just output all the results all the time. So we want to create a where statement, and the where clause is going to be pulling from that search parameter entered by our user. So we're going to say where. So we want to determine which fields do we want to query on. So maybe where artist.artistName. And we could say equals, and then we could say query string. But then if the user doesn't enter it exactly, it's not going to find the artist. So what you can do, depending on how you're writing these queries, we could use a wildcard string. So we could say where artist.artistName like artist name, or album.title like album title. So this will let the user query on albums or artists, and they can query on portions of each, and we should do a pretty good job at getting some results back. So when we do get results back, we also want to order those results. So how do we want to order them? We could order them by any way we wanted. We could do album release year. We could do album title. We'll just do artist.artistName. So this query looks pretty good. There may be syntax errors. If there are, we'll find them. We'll find them later. But what we have now is when the user submits, we're going to run a query, and we are going to get results back, we hope. So the way we would get results back is using PHP PDO. So we do a variable define our statement handler. So here's our database connection, and here's how we do that. So our statement handler is going to use a database connection, which is defined up here. And then it's going to use this query. So there's a couple more lines that we need to add just to make sure this executes properly. We want to pass our array of variables in. So the things we are going to be passing in are these two variables. So artist name and you'll see what we're going to do is pass in the same query string both times. Album title query string. So this variable query string we haven't defined yet. We're going to do that after we do the final bit that's going to get our result set. So here we can get our result set. Again, this is PHP PDO stuff. You really don't have to know much what's going on here other than to either have it available to copy and paste and know what you got to edit, or you can just type it out each time. It's pretty painless either way. Most of your queries are going to look a lot like this. If they don't have any variables in it, you know, it might look something like that. You're just statement handler execute. We have variables we're going to pass through. So when we do that, this results should return a result set. So one or many rows from a database. But one thing we don't have working yet is this query string we haven't defined. So what we want to do is say if is set query string, we want to say our query string equals the value that is in that URL parameter there. And the other thing we want to do, since we're going to be searching for wildcard, meaning we want portions of a band name or an album name to generate results. It doesn't have to be exact. We can also do something like this, which will let us wrap in the query string with essentially a wildcard parameter, or it's going to ignore what's on the left and the right, and any portion of the query does end up finding a result. So we have query string equals, and then the percent signs are what makes it anything on the left as long as our query string is contained within it, and then anything on the right. And we'll see how that works in a little bit. So we have our query. I don't see any syntax errors. We'll see when we run it. So right now we actually have our results too. So what we can do, if we just want to see if it works, we can echo and do a var dump the results. So if the user has submitted data, let's get the data and then let's dump the results. It's just going to be an ugly array, but just to see if our query has any errors, we'll see. Oh, hey, look at that, the query works. So it did just dump this data. It's uglier there than it will be here in the page source. You can see the array breaks it down pretty good. So it actually works, which is somewhat promising. So for what we want to do now that we know we're getting data, we're going to comment this out. We have our data in this results variable. So I'm going to take the results variable, and we're going to get down into the t-body. So we're going to create some PHP again. So this is where we are going to echo our results. So what we want to do is basically echo one row for each result set. So the way you do that is you can put, there's a handful of ways to do it, but you could put the data into a for each statement. So for each results, and we need to alias each of those eaches. So we're going to say for each results as result. So for every result you get back, we're going to do something. So we're going to echo one row of data. So the first thing we can do, we can reuse this guy. We're going to copy, and it looks like this video is going to be a little bit longer than the most. I don't think there's any way around it. It's just a little more complex. So that is what it is. It'll be 20-minute web dev this time. So we can get rid of this. We are going to leave the closing table tags. So we have this loop. So for every row of our result set, so if we do a query and there's 10 results, there's going to be 10 iterations of this loop. We're going to create 10 rows. We can't just dump out random data like we're doing now. And we don't know the data that we want yet, but it is in that result variable. So what we want to do is define the data that we want to dump out like so. So this is a new variable name. This is saying within the result array, there's an element named artist ID. So take that data and store it in artist ID. And then we would go through, and we'll actually do it, we will go through each piece of data that we want and populate a variable for that. So we also have artist name equals result, and you guessed it, artist name. So to speed things up, I usually take one, copy it a bunch of times. I know our artist table had roughly 4 columns in it that we care about. The album had 5. So I'm just going to do 4. This is going to be our artist info. And then 5. We might only end up needing 4 here as well. So artist name, artist ID. We also had a bio. And we had an image. So to get the bio, we can't leave artist name as the field, so we want to name this bio an image. So right now that's the artist info. So for the album info, it's going to be very similar. Album ID. And if you're ever curious what these values are, these have to be what they were called in your query. This side can be anything you want. You could look back at your query, which is up here. Album ID, artist ID, title, release, your album art, or you can go right into your database because those are going to be your database column names. unless you're doing some aliasing, which you probably aren't. If you are, you'll know about it. So we have the album ID, the album title, we just had called title for better or worse, result title. Then we have the album release year, and then we have album art. And again, that is just the name of the file that we have on in our file system. We're not storing the image data. You could, but we're not. So we have artist ID, artist name, bio image, album ID, title, release year, album art. That all looks pretty good. So now we have all the data we need to echo into our table. So instead of this saying 1, that was a placeholder for our artist ID. The Killers was a placeholder for artist name. From Vegas, that was a placeholder for bio. The image, if I do this, I'm going to do this twice. We're just going to echo out the image. This is going to dump the file name on the screen, which isn't going to be very helpful to us. But we're going to do that, then we're going to come back and we're going to fix it. So here is the title of the album. Then we have the release year. And now we have the album art. So that's really all there is to this. We're going to come back and wrap it up and make it look clean and whatnot in a bit. But let's just save this. Now we're going to bounce back. If there's anything else that's going to make our page look ugly. No, that should be pretty good. So we're going to go here. So here we had our dummy data we made in the last video. Here we had just a var dump, dumping the raw data. And now we're going to hit submit, cross our fingers. Hey, look at that, it worked. So here is our live database-driven data. And if I were to add a parameter here, I think this should work as well. Let's just do a search for, I guess if I search for FUST, let's see if it finds a portion. Hey, look at that. So it found a single album. If I find Killers, it's going to find a bunch. So it found everything that matched Killers from the album or artist name. If I leave it blank, it finds everything. And if I want to search for Swift, it's probably going to find only the Swift, Taylor Swift albums. So that is doing a live database search using MySQL. It did it in about 15 minutes, give or take. But it looks kind of ugly yet. And I did promise that we were going to improve the UI on the form, as well as this table. And we're going to replace these image names. You'll see we just have image names here. So tswift.jpg, folklore.jpg. These need to reference images on our file system. So what I had done before in a previous video, you all would have seen it. I uploaded into these folders the artists and the cover art. So every album has a JPEG here, and every artist has a picture of themselves. So what we want to do, here's the artist. So instead of just echoing the image name, we want to do img src equals images. And you can see here it's artists, and then the file name. And then we could say alt. I'm just going to skip the alt tag. It might just get confusing. You could do something and say like alt equals artist name, and then it's going to have an alt tag. If you don't know what an alt tag is, that's fine. But this image right here should now output an image of Taylor Swift and the Killers. And we need to do the same thing here. img src equals images. And this is the albums, and I think I have them in a cover art folder. Boom. So images, artist, and then images, cover art. So now if I save this, and I don't think the sizing is going to be any good here yet, but we'll fix that. Now let's bounce out over here. All right, so now we've got pictures of the artists. And we have, just for fairness sake, we'll also do an image of the Killers. So you can see images are small, images are big. So what do we want to do? In this case, we could target each image type individually and give it a class. And then with CSS, we could make the artist one size and the albums another size. I'm just going to keep it simple. And again, bad practice. I'm just going to create inline style here that's going to target every image tag. So we're going to say open closing style, then we're going to be able to use inline CSS, and we're going to say width, let's do, what do you think, 100 pixels, and height 100 pixels. I'm pretty sure I did upload all square images, so we don't have to worry about perspective, because there is some issues with that if you hardcode widths. Alright, so this looks better. So now all the images are the same size. Let's jazz them up a little bit, and we'll give it a border, 1 pix solid pound CCC. So this is going to give a 1 pixel border of a light gray. And we're going to make the background all white, and we're going to give the images padding. So 4 pixels of padding. So it's going to have a border, it's going to have background white, and then there's going to be padding. So it's going to look a little bit better than just the image. I'm going to add padding bottom 12 pixels. So we're going to make the bottom padding look smaller, so it's going to look a little bit like the Polaroid picture, and then we're going to give it a border radius. We'll make it a small radius, 3 pixels. I feel like let's make these a little bigger just because we got a little fancy with the borders. So now when I do this, you'll see it looks a little bit better. Let's make the bottom 16 pixels. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Our table is still a little wonky. So let's go ahead and fix our table. And to do that, we're actually going to make it, we're going to use pre-built bootstrap classes. So table class equals table. And we want to give it table bordered and table striped. So when I say bootstrap classes, these are just classes that are already included in our bootstrap CSS. They include that we can just reference. And if you want to look up different things you can reference, just search bootstrap. I think they're on version 5.4 or something like that. There's an example for everything out there. Half the internet runs on bootstrap. So now our table is going to start looking, we hope, a little better. All right, so there we go. So now we got better width. We got every other row is different. Everything's centered. We've got a little bit of padding. Could probably use more. So that is shaping up. I think for a table, that's probably pretty good. Our form needs a little work. So we're going to bounce back to our form. So we could see, here's our form. Input type equals text, name equals query string, ID equals query string. What it doesn't have is any classes. So we're going to give it the same bootstrap treatment we gave the rest of our stuff, but we're going to reference a class for a form control. And same thing for our button. Class equals button. If we do btn primary, it'll be blue. So it's probably not going to be a good layout yet of our form. Let's see. It looks a little better. I mean, this goes the full width. That's too small. There's no margin. So let's put it all in a bootstrap column and row system. So what we can do, dump everything into a row. So we've got label, input. We don't need this anymore. Then we've got to label a button. So let's close off our row. And now we want this in the first quarter of the page, this in the second quarter of the page. So to do that, we're going to use div class equals call md3. And then we are going to close that off. The tabs are wonky again. Div class call md3. And so this row, it didn't have margin on the bottom. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to do, let's do MB2. I think margin bottom 2 is going to give us some spacing, and that should be a pre-built bootstrap thing. So now, if we refresh, all right, so that looks a little better. We got our search. We got this good. Our submit is floating. I'm not entirely sure why. But if we take a look, I think it needs to be a button block issue. So our button class, btn primary. So if we go btn block, and then if we take its containing div and give it a d-grid, we should be able to save that. And I'm also going to put a non-breaking space here. So let's see how that looks. Hey, there we go. So now we have our search. You know, it might look better if this is the middle of the page. So we're just going to put a dummy div call MD3 there, one at the top, one at the bottom, and now it should force it in the middle. And I don't like container fluid, so this will make the page not as wide. All right, so now we have our search, our submit. If I run this, so this queries the database. Let's get fewer results. One of our albums, there we go. So this is querying the database, getting results, looping through it. Looks halfway decent. We bootstrapified everything. One thing I don't like though is that it does not put back my search into the search. So if I search Taylor, you'll see it goes up here. We grab it, we loop through, but we lose it here. So what we might want to do to end the video, because I think that covers about everything I was hoping to cover, is automatically populate this field with the search term, which should be very easy to do. So to do that, we need another if is set so we can define our variable. So we're doing PHP again. If is set query string. You can name these variables anything you'd like. I'm just going to say last search equals get query string. So if that variable is set, we are going to call it last search. We can call it anything. We could have done this more efficiently if we wanted to. There's reasons why I call this something different. So what we want to do is if that variable is set, we also want to echo it out as a value. So if is set query string, we are going to be able to echo value equals. So this will set the current value. Value equals last search. Well, you would run into issues if your last search had a single quote, because we're using single quotes. We would escape those and treat them properly, but I'm already 20 minutes past my 10-minute timeline, so we are going to just see. We'll go to the home page. All right, so let's just do killers. So now when we search, query string happens here. This gets repopulated because it was set, and it ran a query on our database for all albums or artists titled The Killers. So that ends this series on working with databases, and we did do it all from started with nothing, built a database, populated a database, built a web form, built the PHP, built the MySQL queries, queried the database, got a result set, and then went ahead and looped through the result set and output it on a screen. So you could run this type of search or query system on anything you wanted. It certainly doesn't have to be a music table. It could be a site search. It could be, searching anything you wanted. So I think that will wrap it up for this series. I don't know what we're going to do next for the next series. I think I might do a Ajax, what I'm calling the world's best Ajax example. So it's doing something very similar to this, but without the page refresh, because every time I hit submit, you see this page refresh happens. That would allow you to have queries in the background of your pages doing things like weather lookups, sports scores, anything you wanted while users do other stuff on your website without it interrupting that other stuff. So that'll probably be our next video. So I guess I hope this was useful, and if so, feel free to like, subscribe, and check out the next videos.